Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of After the Pause. Christy, it's so good to have you here.
Why, thank you. Did I have a choice? Just
No, you
curious.
didn't. You didn't. But I think that the world just they want to hear more of you and me just chatting back and forth. They do.
It's a comment that I've heard often. We just need more
We get a
me and Christy in
ton
our
we get a ton of fan mail from you guys, and so we're here to give you just more of us. Oh, what a way to
Oh my God.
start this. Friends, seriously.
So many regrets.
Oh man. Thanks for joining us, friends. We're so excited to just be here together, just chatting about um life and courage and what it looks like to just follow after Jesus and um to truly embrace that calling that he's given us, which is courageous. I think sometimes I forget that he created us to be courageous, that he calls us courageous. I think of just that chapter that you wrote in the book, Christy. I think chapter 3. Pretty sure that's embarrassing. But the chapter he calls me courageous and the one that you talk about the story of Peter walking on the water um and I think about that story often and just the things that you pulled from it because I need that in my life constantly.
I'm right there with you. It's not like I wrote that out of a place of like, I have got this down. Like, far from it. I wrote that from a place of like, I need to hear this all over again. My goodness. Like, but just how revolutionary that story was for me when I saw that part of it, right? Of like,
Mm-hmm.
it's what the Lord believes about us. And like, that's why he calls us into the places that he does, not because he's trying to freak us out, not because he's trying to just throw us in the deep end, although it feels like that a lot of times. It's because he actually believes that we carry the courage within us to do the things that he's called us to do. And that should be such an empowering thought. It really should.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think like in the moments when we're in a spot where we're like, what am I doing here? Like I should not be here. Like it's so hard for me to remember that. Literally, we just had this situation. We recently got back from Kenya. Such a good trip. We didn't get to record like we wanted to with our good friends there, which I'm still super bummed about. But there were so many other amazing things that happened on this trip. But like this was that was me during this trip where I was like, I do not belong here. I do not belong here. And you and the Lord just kept like pressing in, like, this is where the Lord has called us. Like, this is where we're supposed to be. The Christina had the opportunity to share with two different groups of young girls in the Nakuru area of Kenya, which is just like a town in Kenya, if you don't know what Nakuru is. It's a town. There you go. But I mean, these groups of girls, like I, Chrissy, I remember like those days when we got to chat with them and to share with them and to teach from the book and just different things that the Lord had put on our heart. I left both of those sessions and I was like, oh, it was terrible. Like, it was so bad. I did such a terrible job. And you were always like, what? I thought it went really well. And so, like, even like you and I just experienced this where, like, God called us into a spot that felt to me overwhelming and too much. And just like, what am I doing here? Like, kind of like Peter stepping out of the boat and walking on water, just like, what is happening? Um, and then you and I walked away from those situations with very different perspectives of what the heck just happened.
It's true. Okay, but we also need to take into account you were also physically not feeling well.
I was not
And
well.
that automatically will do something to you mentally. So give yourself grace with that. But yeah, it was interesting to walk out of those situations and one, I mean, we both recognize like it was such a gift, right? Like to even
Mm-hmm.
be able to stand in those places felt like such a gift. It didn't necessarily make it easy to
Yeah.
be in those places, um, because it was still for both of us. I mean, it's not like we're signing up to be public speakers, right? And so there's these steps of courage that you've got to take within those spaces, whether it's a big group, small group, it didn't matter. But it was interesting to just see how different our viewpoints were. And I think that's what's so cool though about the fact that we got to do it together,
Mhm.
is because it's the very things that we talk about in our book as well, like just the value of community, right? Of having
Yeah.
people in your life that can help you grab a hold of courage, that can help make you more courageous, that can help lend you courage when you don't have it yourself. And I think that to me was such a beautiful picture of, coming away from the first group that we met with, like I didn't know exactly how it went, but I think I was just so like awed by the opportunity and just felt like Holy Spirit was certainly present in that room. And so regardless of how it went or didn't went. Oh my gosh.
Like we said,
Writers.
we're writers, not public speakers.
Yeah, that written out, it would have been on point.
On
Um,
point.
regardless of how it actually went, like I found myself able to walk away from that moment of just like, we did it, like we
Hmm.
stepped into a place that the Lord asked us to step. And I think it's something that we have to intentionally practice, right? And again, I wasn't sick, so I didn't have other things like battling with my mind physically to just try to distract me from that. And so for me, walking away from those moments, it was, wow, okay, God, thanks for that opportunity. That was uncomfortable, but surprisingly life-giving. And like, I feel really good about what we were able to do, and to then be able to speak that over you, because that's important in community, right? Like
Yeah.
to call out the gold in each other. I knew that you weren't feeling your 100%, but that didn't make what you had to say that day any less powerful, any less valuable and important for those women to hear. And I do think you rocked it. You absolutely rocked it.
Thanks, buddy. No, it's so true though. Like it's so interesting though to look back at that time though, because like going into the trip, we knew that we were gonna get to connect with, we hoped that we were connecting with two different groups of girls, and we had meetings about it. Like I felt so fine about it. Like I was unsure exactly how it was going to go because you and I hadn't had a chance to connect in person, and that always helps me to be in person with somebody. But leading up to the trip, I was like, it'll be great. It'll be what it is. Like I was like totally, I felt like I was totally trusting the Lord to like make it happen. And then just the day of, I was so in my head and so like doing the very things that we have talked to each other about. And like on this like podcast, we've talked about so much of like that comparison game and that like looking at other people's stories and looking at other people's giftings and being like, what am I doing here? Like next to Christy freaking Michael, like what am I doing here? And I was so in my head, like I couldn't step out of that and couldn't like recognize. I wish so much that in the moment I could have just been there and recognized, oh my goodness, what a gift that like we're here doing this together. I think I did a little bit, but I was again just really struggling so much. And that's what was going through my mind, especially stepping into those speaking engagements and those sessions with those girls, where I was trying to confront a fear because I also don't love public speaking. But then I was also trying to confront like that ugly beast of comparison. Like so we took some, we kind of took turns in our sessions where like I started, you went, like that kind of thing. We went back and forth. And I probably like 5 minutes into my thing, I was like, just get through this because Christy's gonna crush it. So like you finish your thing because Christy's coming in with like the A game. And I like the amount of like fears I was battling with, and then the amount of like comparison that I was battling with was so silly, but it was so real. And I think that a lot of people can struggle with that, especially like when we're facing those intense fears. But what was going through your mind like the day of, like what kind of things were you battling, but also like we went into it very differently, so I'm curious what was going through your mind. We haven't talked about this.
We haven't. What's funny to me hearing you share about like the imposter syndrome and feeling like the person who didn't belong in the room. where I felt that on the trip was actually when I sat in the trainings that your dad was leading. And it was like on leadership and all that. And like I was sitting in the back of the room and I was definitely doing battle that day of like, who
Mm,
am I to be sitting in this room right now? And like the things that he's talking about, like, man, these are my weak points. I'm not good at this. And like kind of berating myself in my head. And so it's not that I didn't experience those moments on that trip. It
mm,
just came out in different ways. So just know I absolutely felt that in those spaces. Going into the spaces with these girls, I mean, I had gone into it similarly in just like open hands, Lord, how do you want to use it?
mm.
Because this is clearly like an opportunity that you've given us. And I think, I don't know, I was just feeling that so deeply anyway. Like Kenya wasn't even on my radar at all until how many weeks ago was it that you and I had a conversation? You talked about your family was going to go. You told me when the dates were, and I like had this moment where I was like, and
I'm
then you were
going.
like, wait, can you come? Yeah. And so I wasn't even in my plan. So already like it just felt like this incredible gift that the Lord had just dropped in my lap.
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, but I am in for whatever you need. And so
Yeah.
that was the mindset I was coming in with, right? Um, so I think because that was just so much my mindset of like, this is a gift and I'm in, it's what drove me forward in those moments. Because look, I am not a public speaker at all. And I am the first one to be hard on myself. And yet I walked away from those moments so proud and
Mm,
not like, oh, good job, Chrissy, you crushed that, but just like proud that I had stepped into something that I know is uncomfortable for me.
hmm.
And I felt like I was confident within that space. Like I felt like God used me in that space. And I don't know
Mm.
exactly how, but I stepped there. And I think that's what matters right now. And so that for me was a totally different mindset to walk into those spaces with. I don't often walk into a space with that mindset. It's usually what I'm trying to get myself to
Yeah.
after coming out of the space and beating myself up, right? Um, so for me, yeah, I think it surprised myself
Mm.
as well. And I think it's just a testimony to the journey that I've been on with the Lord of like, I'm not gonna be afraid of the hard things, of the uncomfortable things. I am gonna be afraid of them, but I'm gonna keep walking
Yeah.
anyway, you know? And I have been working. It sounds weird to say working so hard because I don't like the picture that that creates, but trying to intentionally take those thoughts captive, right?
Yeah.
Trying to intentionally say, I don't think that's true. And I don't want to carry that. And so, God, I'm going to give that back to you. And I'm just going to keep stepping into the places that you've asked me to step. And whatever happens, happens within that space. But I'm going to feel okay because I stepped where you asked me to.
Yeah.
So that for me was kind of the journey that I was on through this whole time that we spent together in Kenya.
Yeah. Well, okay. Then let's talk about what the heck happens when you can't get yourself there. Because I think that's what I was struggling with so much. I think we walked into those situations and this opportunity with similar mindsets. I struggled a little bit more, I think, with like, I always struggle with like trying to prove myself to others and just like wanting to provide that imposter syndrome, wanting to provide something of value and worth to others. Like, I struggle with that and I struggle to believe that I do. Like, and so that was part of my struggle. But for many reasons and then in many situations on this trip, I could not like get myself to the place that I was trying to get myself to. Like, and you know this, but like there were so many moments where I was like, this isn't me. I don't want to be here in this mindset. I don't want to be here in this like anxiety or this stress or this like fear that I'm feeling, but I cannot get myself to where I know I need to be. I could see where I needed to go, but I couldn't figure out how to take those steps. And that was a really big struggle, to be honest. I think that one of the things that really helped me was to see you and to see your courage and the confidence that you walked into those situations with. And I want to be really clear that it wasn't like you were walking around like, we got this. We're great. We like, you're welcome that we're here. You did not walk around like that at all. That's not our heart or mindset. But you walked in what you were just talking about. You walked into this opportunity believing it was a gift. Not that I didn't, but there was also just a sense that you carried on this trip that was like, God's called us here. And like, I can take courage in that alone. For me, that wasn't enough. And that was a little bit wild because that's not usually my mindset or my heart. So it was a little bit of an out of body experience for me on this trip. But like, truly, there were so many moments on this trip, whether it was with the girls or with other different situations that we had, that I just kept looking at you, where I was like, okay, what's Christy's heart right now? What's her mindset? Because I think I need to borrow a little bit of that. And I think that like if we both were falling apart, that would have been a really interesting trip to be on. So praise God that you weren't. But like 100%, like I kept watching you, not because you were perfect, but because you were walking into these situations with the mindset that I was trying to get to. And I think that that is such a gift that like we're able to do that together. Because I think that that is 100% like what you said earlier, why the Father puts us in community with each other. So that on the days where like I'm falling apart, like I can look at you again, not because you're perfect, but because you have something that like I'm trying to get myself to.
Mhm. Yeah. No, and there's such a value in that. And to the one who's like struggling, like you said, to even get there, I think look at who's around you, first of
Mm-hmm.
all. Look at who's around you, and not in the sense of comparing yourself, like
Yeah.
we've said. Like this is not a comparison thing, but who's around you that is going to help call out the things in you that need to be called out, like in an uplifting way, right? Like who's your cheerleader? Who's your encourager? Who's your person that's like, hey, I see that you're struggling. Borrow some of my courage today.
Yeah.
I feel like the Lord's given me an extra dose of it. It's about who is around you, because to try to manufacture that on our own,
Mm.
it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't. And none of us can do that. I mean, ultimately, our courage comes from the Lord, right? And I love, gosh, I feel like I go to this scripture a lot, but it's just because I love it. And it's so true. Acts 17:28 says that in him we live and we move and we have our being. And that means like outside of Christ, the things that we need, we're gonna run out of if we're not finding them in him. So I think that, I mean, ultimately we've got to be connected to the Lord, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
he is our first and foremost source of
Yeah.
those things that we need. But the second place, or the second thing that we need in place in our lives, is others. Because we're not meant to do life alone. We're not meant to just kind of walk like, oh, it's just me and God. That's all I need. Like,
Mm.
yes, he is all you need, but he's not all you need. Like, you
Yeah.
need others around you. And it's because you need to be able to borrow and loan courage to those around you. Um, because we're just better that way. We're better
Yeah.
together. That's somebody's motto. Let's steal it.
It's ours now. No, but that's so true. And I love that just this conversation really is just about communion, first with the Father and then with each other. We need that. And because I think that, look, like whatever God is calling you to, whatever that looks like, it could be something very simple and very like daily mundane. God is just calling me to show up in this space. And it's like, it feels small, but like wherever he calls us, like fear is going to point its sword at us. And like, I think, I think it's been a minute since like I've had to do battle like that. Like there's multiple times on this trip where I was like, this is a war. Like this feels like a huge battle, like the spiritual battle that can come when we say like, okay, I'm going to step into this place that I think God has called me to, and I'm going to confront the fears that that I'm feeling. And I'm going to try to live with courage and with bravery. Like, get ready for a battle. Like, I think it was like silly of me to like be like, what is happening? Because like, well, what was happening was like, I think the enemy was like, no, you can't be here. But God was like, yeah, no. I called them here. Like, I want them to be here. And so I think the other part of this conversation is also like, be ready. Don't be surprised. Like when there's pushback or when there's a battle, maybe it's not even pushback from other people. Like everyone was so for us on this trip. I mean, they were the most gracious hosts. Like even the girls were the most gracious girls of like, we're running into difficulties right now. And they're like, okay, no problem. Like they were the most gracious people. So it wasn't like I was going up against battle against people, but there was just, it felt like there was so many like spiritual battles going into it as well. And that's truly where like we needed communion with the Father. Like I needed to just be reminded that he calls me courageous and he's called me here. And then I needed like communion with you, with my parents, even with like our hosts, to just continue to be like, nope, you're called here. This is exactly where you're supposed to be. And I think without those two things, like it's impossible to like truly stand where the Father has called us for at least a long period of time. I think you can maybe do it for like a little bit, but it's really hard to like keep standing there when it feels like the battle is so intense and so thick. And that's truly just where we need each other and need that communion with the Father.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And I mean, yes. So, right, like this is all about communion. It's about communion with God. It's about communion with each other. But I'm also curious, like, so best practices, right? So for that person who's listening and is like, oh man, how do I just start cultivating some of these things in my own life? What are some key practices, at least that you've found for you? I know some of ours overlap, some of ours are very different in what we do, but practices that you kind of try to put into place in your life to help cultivate courage, to help cultivate communion, both with the Father and with others.
Yeah. I think that the number one for me, at least right now, maybe it's because Kenya wasn't that long ago. And so I'm processing a lot of it. But number one right now is vulnerability. Like it seems like a strange practice to talk about, but like I needed to like let down my guards, especially on that trip, to let you and others like see I'm really struggling right now. And to even admit that to myself and to admit that to you, who I was like, I friend, I always want to make you proud. And I always want to like, I want you to look at me like, oh, she's so awesome. And so to like admit, thank you. That was just a way to get that compliment right now and right here. And I can put it on YouTube forever. But like I think that we all have people like that in our life where like, I just want to make you proud. I just want to like, I want you to look at me and just see someone that's strong and capable. But like, I didn't feel any of that. And I needed to be honest about that, like even for my own sake. And like, so that I could even invite you into a space of like borrowing and sharing courage with each other. Like I needed to have that vulnerability first that made me feel real uncomfortable and real weak, but also I was having a hard time hiding it anyway. So you were probably like, yeah, Kate, I already knew that you were struggling. But I think that vulnerability is one of the first ones for me. And then I think like another big thing, like when you're trying to build communion with the Father and with others, is to just keep showing up even when the emotions don't follow. Like I'm thinking of like almost every morning, I try to like pray, journal, read scripture. And sometimes like the emotions aren't there where I'm like, I don't really want to do this, or I don't really feel God. Like I don't feel like he's close at all. Or like, I'm so afraid right now and I can't step past that fear, but I'm still going to show up here anyways. I'm still going to show up with you, like Christy, literally like a person, or I'm going to show up with the Father, who feels really intangible and really like, I don't know where you are sometimes, God, but you're going to show up. I think that that's another big one for me. That's just like, okay, I'm going to show up again. And someday I think I'm going to trust that like the emotions, which I don't always think are trustworthy anyways, I think that they are going to show up. I think that they're going to catch up. But like, even though I may not feel it right now, I just need to keep showing up and I need to be consistent and remind my mind that feels really tired and feels really confused, maybe, that like God is here, like he is with me. He's never left me. So even just reminding myself of those truths, even though like I don't always feel them. I think those are two of the big ones right now in this season.
No, that's really good. I mean, yes and amen to both of those. Like, I think those are both practices that I would also say, like, those are important ones to me. And I think if I could add a third one, so one
Yeah.
that for me, especially during that time that we were there and in the time that's followed since that trip, a big one for me is all about what you talked about with the mind. Like the mind is a battlefield, right? And so for me, I just need some mantras, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need some things like some truths that I'm able to repeat over and over to myself that I know is true, that I know is from the Lord. Because that's the thing too, when it comes to like sharing and borrowing courage from others, like I don't want to give people just my words, right? Like my
Mm-hmm.
words are all right, but the Father's words stand the test of time. And like in his words, you find truth. And it's not that the things that I say are untrue. Sometimes maybe they are. Sorry for any time that's happened. But he is truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can have those words in my life and those can be words that I can give to others, like that's powerful because
Yeah.
that's from him. And so for me, like I camped out in the same album the whole like time that we were there in Kenya. Like
Yeah.
every morning it was just what I was putting on. Every night it was what I was putting on because the songs that I was listening to, the mantras in them and the truth that I was like just pulling from it, like I just needed it. And I was like, I'm going to sit in this for as long as I need it. Psalm 23 has been a huge one for me that I've been carrying since the start of this year and just something that I feel like the Lord is like, I just want you to sit in this. Like, we're not moving past this. And there's going to
Mm-hmm.
be other things that I speak, but like, I need you to hold on to this and learn how to walk in this. And so, finding what are those mantras, those
Yeah.
truths that like you personally need to hold, because then those become the things that you can give to others that they can carry and pull truth from. And that's just a really powerful thing. We do have this mantra. Look, friend, I grabbed our book because friend,
Yes.
we've been ending with a quote from the book. And I feel like there's a couple that I could pull from. But this one, so simple. I'm not going to count how many sentences it is. They're really short. But this is from a chapter that you wrote, the final chapter of the book about courageous communion.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. And it's very much what we've been talking about tonight. And it simply says this happens in communion. We share courage, we borrow courage, we find courage. It's as simple as that. And communion is not easy, but that happens in communion done right and communion
Mm-hmm.
done well, both with the Father and with each other. We share courage, we borrow courage, and we find courage. And friends, to those of you who are listening who've stuck with us for this long, I hope that you can hear that truth. It's what we want this place to be
Yeah.
as we share with you. We're not just out here because we feel like we have amazing words to share. We're here because we just want to create a community of people who want to share and borrow courage from each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's why we stepped into this in the first place. It's why we wrote a book that's really based around the idea of living courageously. So it's what we desire. It's what we hope you hold on to. And it's what we hope you fight for because it's worth fighting for.
Yeah.
If you have never checked this book out, you can do so at our website, a place called braverly.com. There's also a free ebook version there. Who doesn't love free? We're all about stealing people's mantras, but the book we're going to give you for free. You don't have to steal that. So check out the ebook version, or if you want a hard copy, you can order it off the book. And then you can write in it. You can do whatever. There's sections in it at the end. It's what this podcast was called after, right? After the pause. And there's spots in the book to actually pause after each chapter and really reflect and spend time with the Lord and think about what are the things that He's speaking to you. And also on the website, there's a free small group guide. We did that just as an added tool, and we'd love for you to download that and use that. And small group guide, it doesn't have to be done with others, but we designed it so that it could be done with others because, again, we need each other. We want to walk in community together. So you can check out those things. We'll include the links below. Kate, thanks for just being real and honest,
Yeah.
as always,
Oh yeah.
sharing
I
what the
hope
Lord is
that
doing.
oh yeah. I hope that our stories encourage whoever's out there. Yeah, we weren't meant to do this alone.
So we'll see you next time, guys. Join us again.